Martin Scorsese's The Irishman was released in late 2019 to critical acclaim. It was the veteran filmmaker's return to the gangster film, a genre he helped to define and revolutionize, and in the process he worked with many actors who made their bones in the crime genre and who he hadn't worked with in years, such as Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci and Harvey Keitel, and even film legend Al Pacino came along for the ride for an Oscar-nominated performance in his only ever Scorsese film. The Irishman tells the story of mob hitman Frank Sheeran and his relationship with his mentor Russell Bufalino and Teamster's union boss Jimmy Hoffa, who he is eventually tasked with killing by Bufalino. The film covers Sheeran's early days in the mob, his time working for the Teamsters, the murder of Hoffa, and Sheeran in his old age as he comes to terms with the violent life he has lived. The film covers themes of regret, guilt, and retrospection, in stark contrast to many of Scorsese's crime films of old, such as Goodfellas and Casino. Now, as long-time subscribers of this YouTube channel will know, and if you aren't subscribed, feel free to do so, but people who have been with the channel for a long time will know that I have been following The Irishman for a long time. I first heard about it when De Niro first spoke about it, which was back in around 2007, more than 10 years before the film would actually end up being released. Since then, I was always on the lookout for news and updates, and due to a combination of my excitement for the film and that The Irishman videos were fast becoming the most popular content on my channel, I doubled down on The Irishman videos on the channel. I must have made my first video on The Irishman about just over 2 years maybe before the film came out. That was round about when I started making videos anyway, and since then I probably made more than 100 videos on the film before it even came out. Talk about obsessed, right? I also had the opportunity to see it in cinemas before it came out on Netflix. I was lucky enough to nab some tickets, and when the film came out, this gangster picture, one of my favourite genres, with my favourite living director and some of my favourite actors of all time, which was almost 4 hours long and had a budget of over $100 million, managed to match the incredibly high expectations I had set for it. It was different to what I thought it would be in many ways. I think most of us came away from the film with a similar sentiment, but I thought it was an incredible picture, one that only got better with repeat viewings. In my initial review for the film, I gave the movie an 8.5 out of 10, which is a really strong score, and I had in mind a higher score after seeing the film, but felt the de-aging CGI, which was incredible in places, was really poor in others, and let the film down, especially in the first hour or so, which is where most of the dodgy CGI is. Many subscribers of the channel didn't like the movie, which is fine. I can see why people wouldn't like it. One of the key things many people point out is that they couldn't get over the fact that 70-year-old men were playing 40-year-olds using inconsistent de-aging tech. That's fair enough. There are certain things you have to accept and get past in order to fully enjoy the movie. If I reviewed The Irishman today, I would probably give it a 9 out of 10. My opinion on it has improved with time. It wouldn't ever get a 10 because it isn't a perfect film, but it's one I return to often. I still continue to make videos on the film, and even a while back did a countdown of my 15 favourite scenes from the film, which you can check out if you're interested. But like I said, even way back in my initial review of the film, I didn't think The Irishman was a perfect movie. Few films are, and there were several scenes in the movie I didn't like. So after having made a list of my favourite scenes in the film, let's take a look at those I wasn't a fan of. Number 1. The grocery store beatdown. You knew this was coming, right? It must be on everyone's list. I mean, how could it not be? I still don't know what Scorsese was thinking with this scene. I hope that someday a commentary track is released where he explains what his thought process and intention was. I cannot fathom Scorsese and Thelma Schoonmaker sitting in the editing room, or De Niro sitting in the theatre on the numerous Irishman premieres that were happening, watching the scene and thinking, yep, we did a great job. It was the one scene I specifically mentioned in my review because of how bad it was. I hated it so much that I made an entire video on it, and I usually skip the scene when I rewatch the movie. It's just comical. The way the glass shatters for no reason, the way the grocer hollers and shrieks in pain when it doesn't really look that bad, and he practically holds his arm out and presents his hand on a silver platter for De Niro to stomp on. The worst thing is De Niro's movement. The way he gently ambles his way towards the grocer and pats him with his foot. His kicks towards the guy's face are clearly kicks towards the ear. The stomps look like he's the Tin Man who needs a good oiling while trying to put out a small campfire, or an old man trying to unstick his balls from his legs. And what's with the arms, man? There's even a split second where it looks like he forgets which leg he's supposed to be stamping with, and he comes down hard with the left when he's stamping with the right. And you know what the frustrating thing is? It's like the movie is batting against itself with this scene. It's like it's actively trying to sabotage itself. When The Irishman came out, the two big controversial things people were discussing was the de-aging tech and the fact that these senior citizens were playing men in the prime of their lives. So you're going to have a lot of people sitting in the cinema already skeptical. The film starts slowly, and then the first scene of De Niro and Pesci de-aged, the truck scene, looks so weird and is completely unconvincing. And then shortly after, we get this abomination of a film scene, one of the very worst in Scorsese's entire filmography. By this point, I wouldn't be surprised if many people checked out and thought to themselves, I'm not going to sit through 3.5 hours of this, which is really unfortunate because the movie only gets better. I remember sitting in the cinema watching this. I had invited a friend who was a movie fan but wasn't big on crime cinema and the kind of films that I feel are made for grown-ups. You know, he watches superhero films and stuff like that. I brought him along to show him what a real movie is, and when this scene came along, I was cringing hard. I was in the initial stages of having a mental breakdown thinking, was this the film that I had been waiting for 10 years? Everybody I speak to who didn't like The Irishman brings up this scene as one of the key reasons, which is understandable, but again quite sad because it is ultimately a 30-second scene in a 3.5-hour movie. But the movie doesn't help itself at all here. It's completely unnecessary. If the problem is that De Niro can't move like a young man, then there was absolutely no reason why this needed to be a wide shot done in a single take. Shoot it with close-ups, what's wrong with that? In fact, just show De Niro close-up and Peggy's reaction. That way the violence is implied, and we can only imagine the horror Sheeran subjected the grocer to. Her reaction in the film makes it look like she's thinking, damn, my dad is old. The second scene I have big problems with is the attempt to scare Dorfman. This scene I have issues with for different reasons to the first. In fact, at face value, it's actually a good little segment of the movie. Any scene with De Niro and Pesci is golden, and De Niro looks ferocious here. And then the attack is well staged, it's shot well and has good music, it flows nicely and highlights how the Union is changing whilst Hoffa is in the can. And I love the way the shooter's car just skids away. So why don't I like it? Well, it's because of how the scene sits with the story and in terms of the movie's themes. One of the whole points of this film is that Frank Sheeran is a loyal soldier who doesn't question the orders of his boss, Russell Bufalino. He has a close, loving relationship with Jimmy Hoffa, and when Hoffa's relationship with the mob turns sour, he is given the order to kill Hoffa. Will he do it? Will he back out at the last second? Will he send Hoffa a signal to warn him? So many questions for the audience, but then he does it anyway, and he has to live with the guilt of doing so, alone I might add, as the likes of Bufalino and Fat Tony Salerno, the guys who ordered the hit, eventually die too. But isn't this basically the same thing in principle? Sheeran works for Hoffa. He's on Hoffa's side. He's a staunch Hoffa supporter, both in terms of the Union battles and in terms of the men's personal lives. And here, he's literally betraying Hoffa. He's going behind Jimmy's back to scare Dorfman, a Hoffa man, into ceasing to stop blocking loans to the mob, which was the whole argument between Hoffa and the mob in the first place. Why was there no scene of Sheeran thinking to himself, hang on, should I really be doing this? I'm Team Hoffa, not Fitz. So why am I taking away power for Hoffa by scaring Dorfman into submission? It just doesn't work. It makes no sense that Bufalino would send Sheeran of all people to do this job. It doesn't happen in the book, and it takes away power slightly from the murder of Hoffa, Sheeran's ultimate betrayal, by having him already betray Hoffa. And you'd think the two men, Dorfman and Sheeran, would be on really good terms, seeing as though they're both Union men and both close to Hoffa. It's worth mentioning also that in the book I Heard You Paint Houses, which The Irishman is based on, Sheeran praises Dorfman greatly. He respects him a lot, especially given his past as serving in the Marines and at the Battle of Iwo Jima. Sheeran and Dorfman had that military connection, and Sheeran also laments his death, where he was whacked supposedly because he was going to be brought in on high-level charges and the mob thought he might flip. Sheeran says that Dorfman was a stand-up guy who would have never flipped. So then to have this scene where he shoots at Dorfman, for all the mentioned reasons, just leaves a bad taste in my mouth. I imagine if the death of Dorfman was actually shown, they would have bizarrely had Sheeran do it in the film, because he seems to do everything else, which would have compounded my issues with this scene. I'm surprised that this scene isn't mentioned more in criticism of The Irishman. When you consider the theme of loyalty and Sheeran's devotion but eventual betrayal of Hoffa, no one seems to notice that he's already betrayed Hoffa, and he's actively one of the reasons why Hoffa is in such a dire state when he comes out of prison and struggles to wrestle control back from his union. Some might call it foreshadowing for what later comes, but I don't buy that. The issue could have easily been solved by showing Sally Bugs or Skinny Razor, anyone else aside from Sheeran, doing the deed. I mean, Bobby Cannavale could have really done with more screen time. Sheeran is even shown to be such a bloodthirsty maniac that he's willing or even suggesting to kill Dorfman in the scene between him and Bufalino, and only doesn't because Bufalino turns down the opportunity. Of course, eagle-eyed viewers might point out that they never actually show that it was Sheeran who did the shooting. Maybe he did feel bad about it, so sent a delegate or something, but it's still heavily implied that it was him and doesn't take away from the problem. In fact, to be honest, the entire depiction of Alan Dorfman is really weird in the film. He's like some geeky kid with big specs when he was actually a highly respected, tough-as-nails former soldier who had major connections with the mob, and is actually the guy who Andy Stone from Scorsese's Casino is based on. He was tight with the Chicago outfit and was not someone who would be subject to an attack like this without repercussions. Creative license is a thing, of course, but Dorfman was really screwed over in this movie. So there you have it. I was thinking about adding one or two more, maybe the Joe Colombo hit, which is a good scene, but they never explain who he is. It does come off as a little bit random. But those mentioned are really the two that stuck out, and this video turned out to be a lot longer than I thought it'll be, so I'll end it there. What's your opinion of The Irishman? If you liked the film, are there any scenes that stick out to you that you don't like? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.